This is my update for Russian military operations in Ukraine for May 11th, 2022. And I think this is an important juncture that we've reached. There was the May 9th Victory Day celebration in Russia and elsewhere around the globe. This is the celebration of the defeat of Nazi Germany at the end of World War II. And it's an important juncture because the Western media had been spreading rumors that Russia would announce a full mobilization, bringing all of their military force to bear on Ukraine. They would announce this during the Victory Day celebration, but then that didn't happen. The West said that it was going to happen because they have been saying that Russia has been taking huge losses, losing tens of thousands of troops, losing huge amounts of equipment, that their fighting capacity cannot be sustained. And in order for this lie to continue walking, they would have to try to get some sort of sign from Russia that they were failing, that they were desperate. And this is why they came up with this idea that there would be this mobilization announced during Victory Day. And then when it wasn't, now the Western media and Western governments, whom the Western media speaks for, they have to explain why Russia is losing so badly, but yet they're not even going to do a full mobilization. And Ukraine has been doing endless mobilizations. Their entire military is engaged in this conflict with Russia. Russia's entire military is not engaged with Ukraine. Just a part of it, the part that they pre-positioned before February 24th to carry out these operations, that is what they have been using up until this point. There has been no massive reinforcement or resupply effort or mobilization at all. Seeing that should tell you something, at least one thing. It should tell you that the Western media has been extremely dishonest with their coverage, and they have been disingenuously portraying Russia as losing and Ukraine as winning. We're going to get into all of that in this update. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you briefings from the US Department of Defense. I'm going to show you Ukrainian general staff admitting that Russia is making progress in the Donbas. And as always, I'm going to bring in Russian state media, statements from them when necessary, and additional information to add context and to enhance understanding of the situation. So let's start with this. This is U.S. Department of Defense. Senior defense official holds a background briefing May 10th, 2022. And they start out by saying, we still assess Russian ground force in the Donbas to be slow and uneven. Most of their energy seems to be focused between Izium and Slavyansk. Again, that was a line of approach that we had talked about before, and that's where, again, most of the ground activity seems to have taken place over the last 24 hours. When they say slow and uneven, they make it sound like Russia is having some kind of problem, and that's why their progress is slow and uneven. But the senior defense official later admits that given the terrain, given the weather, given the familiarity with both sides, with the area, given the heavy dependence on long-range fires that we knew was coming, we said from the very beginning that the fight there could be prolonged, and we still believe that. And that is them acknowledging that it's the type of fighting that leads progress to be slow and uneven. It's not because of Russian failure or incompetence. It's the nature of the type of combat that is taking place. It is an artillery battle, and that is very slow, very methodical, and progress is very slow and uneven. And again, like I've said in other updates, if the Pentagon is admitting Russia is making slow, uneven progress, but progress nonetheless, what does that mean Ukraine is doing? Ukraine is doing the opposite of progress, which is losing. They are losing. They are losing ground. They are losing men. They are losing machines. They're losing all other types of very essential equipment as Russia progresses, however slow or uneven. I also want to point out that the Ukrainian General Staff, they have a Facebook account right here. And this is operational update right here, operational update from today, so May 11th. And They say the Russian enemy continues to conduct full-scale armed aggression against Ukraine. Russian enemy is increasing the pace of strategic offensive operations in the Eastern Operational Zone. I also want to point out something else. Notice how when they refer to Russia, anywhere they refer to Russia, it's a lowercase r. It's a lowercase r. This is how childish and unprofessional the general staff of the armed forces of Ukraine are. Blue check mark. This is how unprofessional they are and how childish they are. And this is a way to not just dehumanize the Russian military forces that are in Ukraine, but to dehumanize Russia in general. It's very troubling, but it's also no surprise at all. This is how the people in charge of Ukraine since 2014, installed into power by a US-backed violent coup. And this is how they have treated their own people. And of course, if they treat their own people horribly, they're also going to treat anyone else that they have a issue with horribly. And just for contrast, I want to show you this. This is TASS. This is Russian news agency. This is state media. Russian forces destroy 793 drones, 2,979 armored vehicles in Ukraine, capital U, operation, top brass. Just to give you something to compare and contrast with the Ukrainian General Staff's approach and their attempt to dehumanize Russia and Russia's refusal to lower themselves to that level. I also want to point something else out. In this TASS report here, this is kind of their update. And they say that nearly 400 Ukrainians have died. And I assume that this is a daily tabulation. And I have been following this conflict closely since it began. And I have been following multiple Telegram channels from both sides. And I have noticed the number of Russian losses first plateauing and then trailing off. And there's probably like 2 or 3 losses shown on pro-Ukrainian channels or even on the Ukrainian General Staff's Facebook page. They'll show occasionally dead Russian soldiers, but maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 every day, every other day. And the Russian Telegram channels are showing hundreds of dead Ukrainians every day. This is relatively recently. This is since the fighting has focused primarily in the east, in the Donbas region. It is hundreds every day. And that is a lot. That is a lot of men being lost. Ukrainians being lost in the Donbas region. Getting back to the Pentagon briefing, the senior defense official notes that Russia still has the majority of their combat power available to them. And that means the combat power that Russia pre-positioned along Ukraine's border before February 24th, not the total summation of Russia's military power. Again, they have not tapped into that yet. So actually, let's get into that. Let's get into this rumor of the full mobilization that Russia was supposed to announce on Victory Day but didn't. Because again, this is the Western media saying it, and it wasn't based on any actual evidence. Russia could still call for a full mobilization, and then they would have the entirety of Russia's military power to focus on Ukraine. They have not done that yet. But let's take a look at this Newsweek article. Let's start here. Russia hires war mobilization specialists after denying it'll declare war. And this was before Victory Day, a couple of days before Victory Day. Russia denied it, and then it turned out that they weren't planning to announce mobilization on Victory Day. So imagine that, Newsweek lying and Russia telling the truth. Imagine that. So Newsweek says all of this evidence that Russia is hiring mobilization specialists. They say it comes amid growing concerns that Putin will officially declare war on Ukraine on Victory Day, an annual Russian commemoration of the end of World War II on May 9th, per analysis by UK defense officials, who said earlier this month that he likely desires to demonstrate significant military success ahead of the holiday, which is ridiculous. Russia, the government, did no such thing. Russian President Vladimir Putin did no such thing. In his speech during Victory Day, he did not have to resort to, fabricating or citing some sort of victory that they've had in Ukraine to correlate it with Victory Day. Here's the Washington Post. Same thing. Just a couple of days before Victory Day. On a Victory Day without victory, Putin faces choice over all-out war. Again, this was them projecting onto Russia this need they claimed Russia had to show some sort of victory. And there's a couple of things, and this is one of the authors is Liz Sly, and if you followed her work throughout the Syrian conflict, you would not be surprised at all about what the Washington Post had to say. So it says, ahead of Russia's most patriotic and somber holiday, Victory Day, on Monday, there is no victory in the war against Ukraine, but plenty of rumors that President Vladimir Putin will order a general mobilization of soldiers to secure one. And the Washington Post also claimed, analysts see mobilization as Russia's best hope to turn the tide and defeat Ukraine by reinforcing demoralized forces and plowing them back into the war. But the risks, admitting that the military campaign so far has been a failure and igniting domestic opposition, may be too great. But this analysis that the Washington Post is citing, this is all predicated on the belief that Russia is losing this conflict with Ukraine. But you have to remember, the West is claiming that Russia wants to conquer all of Ukraine. They wanted to take Kiev. They want to take the entire country, all of the land within its borders, and just absorb it into Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin did not say that. When he announced this operation on February 24th, 2022, he said there were 3 objectives: to demilitarize Ukraine, to denazify Ukraine, and to protect the people in Donbas. And you can see all 3 of those objectives being achieved right now in Ukraine. You had presidential advisor Alexei Arestovich admit, this was weeks ago, that Ukraine's military industry was destroyed. The Nazis, especially the Azov battalion, their main force was trapped in Mariupol, and they're hiding underground in the Azovstal steelworks right now. They have had their numbers significantly reduced, and other Nazi formations across the line of contact in Donbas, in Kharkov, they also all face the same fate as those trapped in Mariupol. And of course, protecting the Donbas region, that is where the main fight is taking place right now in the Donbas region, to do just that, to secure the Donbas region, to eliminate the Ukrainian forces that are threatening it, that have been threatening it for the last 8 years. And the destruction of these forces will be a significant part of the demilitarization. So that's all going on. And this is, from Russia's point of view, this is them winning. But from the West's point of view, they don't want to even admit that those were the main objectives, as announced by the Russian president. If you watched Victory Day, if you watched Russian President Vladimir Putin's speech, and if you didn't, there's this from Bloomberg. The link to this will be in the video description below. The full transcript, if you read it or if you listened to it, he didn't try to cite some sort of victory, some symbolic victory in the Ukraine crisis. He was taking a very solemn approach to it about the sacrifices Russian forces are making to secure the Donbas region, to protect Russia. That's what the speech was about. And again, this is because the West assumes that if they were in a similar situation, they would need a symbolic victory. As a matter of fact, to spoil Victory Day, Ukraine was working on 2 different military operations. This attempt to push Russian forces back at Kharkov, and also the retaking of Snake Island. The Snake Island operation was completely botched. It was an absolute failure. And let me get into that real quick. Again, kind of jumping out of order here, but this is from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and this is some video of a helicopter they claimed they shot down over Snake Island. So they were talking about Snake Island, but aside from this video and a couple of other small things, they have not talked about this. And why aren't they talking about this operation that they conducted around Snake Island if it was a success? Of course, they would still be talking about it. They're not talking about it because it was a complete failure. And again, going back to TASS, Russia's side of the story here, just keep in mind it's Russian state media. Bodies of 27 Ukrainian special ops troops, nationalists, left on Snake Island, top brass. The bodies of 27 Ukrainian special ops forces troops, as well as nationalists, have been left on Snake Island after Kiev's operation failed, the Russian Defense Ministry spokesman said. So that's what Ukraine was trying to do. Conjure up some sort of symbolic victory, something that would not do anything at all to change the tide of the main battle in Donbas, but something that they could use politically to either spoil Victory Day for Russia or to give some sort of morale boost to Ukrainian people, Ukrainian military forces. And of course, they accomplished neither. One other thing about Victory Day on May 9th, there's a parade. There are something like 11,000 Russian troops that paraded through Moscow, and over 100 different types of vehicles, tanks, armored personnel carriers, missiles. And then there's usually a flyover, but this year it was canceled. It was canceled, and you should have seen the Western media insinuating all of these reasons why it was canceled, that they were worried about sabotage or something like that. But just a day or two before the actual Victory Day celebration, they had a rehearsal, a full rehearsal with 77 aircraft. This here from NBC News. Planned flyover at Russian military parade canceled, with organizers blaming the weather. And they're insinuating that there was some other reason. They said 77 planes, helicopters marking 77 years since the victory were scheduled to take part, but then they canceled it. And the reason they canceled it was because of weather. If the clouds are under 500 feet, then they cancel it. And this has actually happened before. This is from the Moscow Times. This is a pro-Western newspaper. Victory Day flyover canceled due to bad weather, May 9th, 2017. Because it happens. It happens. And it happened this year. I want to point something out here. 77 aircraft for this Victory Day parade. Okay, they didn't do the flyover, but they did the rehearsal. I saw the rehearsal. That's 77 aircraft. That is more aircraft for a parade in Moscow than Ukraine has right now in their inventory. And we know that because articles like this from CNN, Ukraine's Air Force has added about 20 more operational aircraft after influx of spare parts. Senior U.S. defense official says, this is from April 20th. And if we come down here, it says, in early March, about 2 weeks into the war, the defense official said Ukraine has 56 fighter aircraft, which composed about 80% of its fixed-wing fighters. But the Ukrainians weren't using their aircraft much, flying only about 5 to 10 missions per day. And I'm sure the number is less than that now. I just want to put this into perspective. People who claim that Ukraine is winning, Russia has more aircraft available for a parade in Moscow than Ukraine has altogether to continue fighting this war. And now, speaking of sorties per day, 5 to 10 missions per day, that is what Ukraine is flying. According to a senior defense official, getting back to this Pentagon briefing, the senior defense official says, and the Russians are also flying combat air patrols near Snake Island. That's, I think, an outgrowth of the attacks that the Ukrainians conducted there in the last few days. So that's the Pentagon admitting that Ukraine was attacking Snake Island. The fact that the Ukrainian general staff are not talking about it's because it failed. It was an absolute failure. And the extent to which they failed, we can only guess. We have the Russian side. Ukraine's not saying anything. We could only assume that it was pretty bad. The senior defense official says their Russian sortie count is up over 300 now. So that is an increase from what we've seen in the past. We largely talked about them being between 200 or 300. Now they're over 300 in the last 24 hours. And again, their airstrikes are focused on the Donbas, Mariupol, some standoff strikes on Odessa. And every time they talk about Russian air power or Russian cruise missiles, someone always asks, when are they going to run out of precision-guided munitions? The senior defense official says that Russia is using them in abundance. They're burning through their precision-guided munitions, but there's no indication that they're going to run out of them anytime soon. They also said that the sanctions are having a bite on Russia's ability to replenish those stocks in their defense industrial base, making it harder, this is a quote, making it harder for Mr. Putin to replenish those stocks. But I want to show you this article. This is Reuters via The Hindu. The chip challenge, keeping Western semiconductors out of Russian weapons. And this whole article is about how Russia is getting whatever they need indirectly. The US might not be shipping it to Russia directly, but there's all sorts of ways Russia can get their hands on it. And if you read all the way to the bottom of the article, they admit that there are ways that they could try to trace and track these components and prevent them from falling into, Russian hands, or at least penalize the people that are allowing them to. But they said efforts to start doing this haven't even begun, and it would be an extensive process to do it. So they have these sanctions. Russia has already been getting around them since 2014, really. And they're going to continue to find ways around them. And by the time the West puts a system into place to trace, track, and block these components from ending up in Russia, Russia will either be making them domestically, or they will have some sort of deal with a country like China, who will be more than happy to supply them with these electronic components. Also during this briefing, the senior defense official was citing as proof that Russia is running out of precision-guided munitions. They said they're dropping dumb bombs or unguided munitions on Mariupol. Now, when they say that, they're talking about the Azovstal Steelworks. This is an industrial complex. It is the last remaining area where Ukrainian forces are. They're hiding underground. It is a huge complex, if you've ever seen a picture of it from the air. It is a massive complex. There are no civilian homes in that area. And so what Russia's doing, because they don't know exactly where they are in there, they're just carpet bombing it. Why would you use precision guided munitions to hit a massive industrial complex where there are no civilians? Why would you use precision guided munitions to do that? Why wouldn't you just carpet bomb them with ordinary unguided munitions? So again, this is the Pentagon. I mean, the Pentagon knows this. This is them trying to work an angle to make people think that Russia could fail, could collapse any day, could run out of cruise missiles any day, could pack up and go home any day. This is part of the propaganda war. The senior defense official claims that Russia has 99 battalion tactical groups in Ukraine right now, having added several of them recently. Now, a battalion tactical group, this is a formation of between 800 to 1,000 troops. They have something like 140 to 150 vehicles. And when I say vehicles, I mean they have main battle tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, mobile artillery, which includes multiple rocket launcher systems. They have anti-air platforms. They have everything. It is a huge amount of equipment for such a small number of men. When you compare it to, say, a U.S. brigade combat team, this would be between 4,000 to 5,000 soldiers. They of course, they have a lot of equipment, but there's certain things like artillery that they need to call other units to provide them. They have to call in artillery support. A battalion tactical group is a small formation compared to a brigade combat team, but they have everything that they need. They have artillery, anti-air, main battle tanks, infantry. They have everything. And then what they usually do is serve as heavy support for additional infantry that are in the area. So in Syria, they would use something like this in conjunction with the Syrian Arab Army, Iranian militias, or Hezbollah. And in Ukraine, obviously, they're working closely with these Chechen forces and these militias in the Donbas region. Speaking of the Donbas region, they also say, the senior defense official says, we would assess today that Popasna is in Russian control. But again, we'll keep watching this over time. Popasna, well, they call it Popasna, but in Russian, it's Popasna, is just to the east of Slavyansk. And we have talked about Popasna before. just to give you an idea, again, the Western media is going to continuously repeat that Russia is not making any gains. Any gains that they claim they've made is just fake news. So I just want to show you how this all played out in the media, just so you can see for yourself that they're going to deny that it happened, and then eventually, when it's impossible to deny, they'll very sheepishly admit that it's happened. So this was May 8th. This is Reuters via the Star. Chechnya's Kharkov says his soldiers control Popasna. Ukraine disagrees. And this article says, Ramzan Kadyrov, the head of Russia's Republic of Chechnya, said on Sunday his soldiers have taken control of most of the eastern Ukrainian city of Popasna, or Popasnaya, while Ukrainian officials said a battle for the town in the east of the country is ongoing. The article also said Sergei Gaidai, the governor of the Luhansk region, this would be the governor according to Kiev, and honestly, what is he governing? Virtually the entire oblast is under the control of the separatists, but that's neither here or there. He says on Saturday that Ukrainian forces still control the area, and they quote him saying, the situation is very difficult, but under control. That's what he said. He said that on a Telegram video post, so Telegram being a social media platform. And then there was this the very next day, this also from Reuters. Ukraine troops retreat from Popasna, Luhansk governor confirms. Ukrainian troops retreated from the eastern Ukrainian city of Popasna, the governor of Luhansk region said on Sunday, confirming previous reports that it had been taken. So again, this is what they're going to do. This is what they've been doing since February 24th, and this is what they're going to continue to do until Russia finishes doing whatever it is that it's doing in Ukraine. And again, this is the slow and uneven progress that Russia is making. And when you're admitting, when the Pentagon is admitting, or when the Ukrainian general staff, they're admitting that Russia is making progress, it means that Ukraine is losing, just like they just lost Popasnaya. Now, what happens with taking Popasnaya? Let's look at the map. This is Ukraine. This is the Donbas region. If we zoom in here, this salient here, this is Popasnaya. What they're doing is they're cutting through the line of contact. This was the line of contact all the way along here. They've cut through it, and now they are operating in the depth of Ukraine's defenses. Now, it's a multi-layered defense. They have front line, they have fallback positions, they are fortifying all of these towns, but that is what they're doing. They're cutting through it, and they are threatening the flanks of Ukrainian forces to their north and to their south. And what they're going to do, most likely, is head along this highway to this town here, and eventually what they're trying to do is reach Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. They're trying to reach it from several axes. And this raises the danger even further of these Ukrainian forces in the Donbas region being completely encircled, cut off, and either completely destroyed or taken prisoner in the thousands. They will have thousands of prisoners if they surrender. Now, at the same time that this is all happening, since I got the map out, if you look a little bit further to the north, you will see Kharkov, the northeastern city of Kharkov. It's right here near the border with Russia. This red is controlled by Russia, and you see these blue flags, these blue and white icons with the flags. These are settlements, villages that they claim Ukraine has taken back. But as I've said in the past, Russian forces around Kharkov, they are conducting a fixing operation. That means they're trying to keep Ukrainian troops there in Kharkov or around Kharkov so that they don't go to the Donbas region and reinforce Ukrainian troops where the main fighting is taking place. That's what that is. So whether Russia falls back or they come back and take back a couple of those villages, whether they do that or not, or Ukraine reaches the Russian border, it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter as long as they're not going into the Donbas region to reinforce the fighting there. That is the primary objective right now that Russia is working on. And I've said this many times before. If you look at how Russia conducted military operations in Syria from 2015 to present day, they would create lines of contact with the enemy all over the country, but then they would have a task group going from one objective to the other. And that's where they would focus all of their power, their energy, their troops on that primary objective. Everything else was fixing. They were fixing militants in position so that they couldn't go off somewhere else to reinforce the fighting around the primary objective. When they finish taking that primary objective, they will look at the facts on the ground and see where they will go next. And in some of these places where Syrian Arab army forces were holding militants in place, sometimes they would get overwhelmed and they would fall back. But that was okay, because that was not the primary objective. The primary objective was that whatever city it was that they were encircling and taking. Right now in Ukraine, the primary objective is the Donbas region, that encirclement of Ukrainian forces that they are doing right now, even according to the Pentagon and Ukraine's general staff. That is really important to keep in mind. The Pentagon, Ukraine, the Western media, they're all going to look at these peripheral battles that have really no impact on the primary objective, and they're going to use that as evidence that Ukraine is somehow winning. The Pentagon, the senior defense official during this Pentagon briefing actually said that Mariupol is still being contested. You have this dwindling number of Nazis hiding underground in the Azovstal steelworks. Their injured are literally rotting to death. They're dying of hunger, of thirst, and they have nowhere to go, and they're hiding underground while Russia carpet bombs them. Above ground, that's not Mariupol contested. That is them holed up somewhere, refusing to surrender, and Russia refusing to send soldiers underground in confined spaces to suffer casualties when they can just wait for them to starve to death or to surrender. And speaking of fixing operations, again, back to the Pentagon briefing, the senior defense official is trying to figure out what Russia is doing around Odessa. You know, again, if you look at the map, so we're going to zoom out away from the Donbas region, down here to Odessa. You can see Russian forces are nowhere near Odessa yet. They still have to pass Nikolaev and then reach Odessa. And they're not going to do that until operations are done in the Donbas region. And if that is the next place they want to focus on. Maybe they want to focus on Kharkov. I don't know. We have to wait and see. But they are nowhere near Odessa yet. So the Pentagon says that that might be a fixing operation. And I actually agree. That is part of the reason Russia is striking Odessa. And they have naval forces occasionally threatening Odessa. It's to fix troops there so that they don't leave and reinforce somewhere else, like the Donbas region. But also there's a concentration of military hardware being built up, or at least they're attempting to build it up in Odessa ahead of the fight. And when Russia carries out these strikes, part of this is to degrade their military capabilities there, to take that hardware off the battlefield permanently. So it's a combination of fixing operations and also degrading Ukraine's military capabilities. The senior defense official also notes that Russian forces are holding positions between Kherson. Russia holds the city of Kherson and positions west of it. And they're moving very, very slowly towards Nikolaev. But there's not a lot of progress there because that is not the primary objective right now. If they can make progress, they can. If they can't, they can't. What they'll do is they'll wait until the operations are done in the Donbas region, and then those extra resources can be sent to Kherson and then push into Nikolaev and beyond. That's what's going on here. And again, this is exactly what they did for the last 7 years in Syria. And then, so we're getting toward the end of this Pentagon briefing. One of the Western media representatives present, they asked a question about Russia wanting to create a land bridge from Crimea to Transnistria. So that would be from Crimea to Kherson to Nikolaev, Odessa, and then Transnistria. Let's look at the map. Essentially, create a land bridge from Transnistria, this breakaway region of Moldova, all the way to Crimea down here. And the senior defense official points out that, well, we don't know anything about that yet, but you know, they've already created a land bridge from Crimea all the way back to the Russian Federation, because the Western media representative said something about, hearing that Russia would need a full mobilization in order to reach Odessa and create that land bridge between Transnistria and Crimea. And again, I don't know, but what I would say is that if they wanted to do it now, yeah, they would have to do a mobilization. They would definitely need more forces, because right now the main focus is on the Donbas region. If you want to take two major objectives at the same time, you need to have a huge number of forces to do that. Russia is going to take the Donbas region first, and then they will have all the men that they need to go and take another objective, to focus somewhere else. So when you hear people saying, oh, they need a full mobilization to take Odessa or to take Nikolaev or to reach Transnistria, not necessarily. So that does it for this Pentagon briefing. Things to look out for in the next couple of days until another update comes out is that line of contact in the Donbas region, especially around Popasna, what they're able to do with that breakthrough. And just keep in mind that that is Russia, that is their primary objective, and that is their slow, uneven progress that they're making toward that objective. And then just keep in mind that along the peripheries of this main battle, you know, whatever Ukraine's trying to do at Snake Island or around Kharkov, this is a distraction. This is Ukraine trying to make up for their strategic defeat with these tactical victories. It's all for show. And it will make no difference at all for the actual fighting in the Donbas region. And just keep that in mind when you listen to people from the Pentagon, across the Western media, from Western governments, when they're trying to depict Ukraine as winning. That's actually what's going on there. They're pointing to these tactical victories to avoid discussing the strategic defeat they're suffering in the Donbas region. If you thought this video was useful, please like and share. Think about subscribing. It's free to do. It helps the channel grow. And if you're watching this on YouTube, check out the video description below for other places you can find my work, like on Odyssey or Rumble or on Telegram, just in case YouTube decides to delete my channel. Also in the video description below will be all of these articles and resources that I went over. You can find them and click on them and read them for yourself. There are also ways you can help support my work listed in the video description below. You can do that through Buy Me a Coffee, through Patreon, and through PayPal. And to everyone who has been helping out, whether it's month to month, through one-time donations, or even if you're just helping share my work with others, or sending kind words, or sending in news tips, I greatly appreciate all of that help. I could not do this work without that help. So thank you. And as always, thank you for watching.